distinguished guests, esteemed panelists, and my colleagues. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to this important event where we are gathered to explore the economic perspective on health, heat not burn devices in Indian market, a topic that is both timely and relevant. On behalf of Impact and Policy Research Institute, IMPRI, I extend my gratitude to all of you for taking your time to join us today. The increasing debate around alternative smoking products, particularly around heat-not-burn devices, necessitates a deeper understanding of their economic implications in India. As the world moves forward, less harmful alternatives to conventional smoking is imperative that we evaluate the potential economic, health, and policy impacts in our country. Today, we have the distinguished panel of experts who bring with them a diverse perspectives from the economics, health, policy, and industry. I would like to extend a warm welcome to Mr. Saugata Bhattacharya ji, former Chief Economist of Axis Bank. I would like Arjun to offer flowers, plants to him as a gratitude for accepting to be here. Mr. Saugata Bhattacharya ji will also be chairing our session today. We are also honored to have with us Dr. Sasmit Patra, Member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha. Thank you so much, sir, for being us and honoring us. We also have the pleasure of having Professor Nilanjan Banik, Professor and Program Director, BA Economics and Finance at Mahindra University, and Visiting Consultant IMPRI. Professor Banik is the author of the report we are about to launch very soon. His insightful research forms the foundation of our discussion today. And along with Professor Banik, we'll be also having Ms. Urvashi Prasad. She's on the way. Now we'll be having Dr. Pawan Gupta ji, Senior Consultant and BLK. Thank you very much, sir, Max Hospital, for being here. We also have proud privilege of having Mr. Sanjeet Kumar, Joint Director of Finance at the Ministry of Railways. Thank you very much, sir. And myself, I also will be one of the panelists, and soon we'll be actually releasing the report, and I'll be going to my chair to thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you. And now, shall we wait for Urvashi ji for the release of report, or we will release? Okay. So now we'll be releasing the report, and following that, Banik ji will take the discussion and run us through the presentation, or we can have the chair's remarks first. So, I think let's have the chair's remarks for 5 minutes, and then Banik ji can speak. Yeah. So I can.
So we can have a picture with the report? Yeah, just to make a release? Yeah.
Can you take one more picture, please? Sorry. Apologies.
So firstly, thank you very much for this privilege. I mean, I'm saying this because I'm the economist. I mean, my domain knowledge in this is zero. So I'm surrounded by people. I mean, and Nilanjan Dr. Banik has worked really hard on this. I know. So the thing that struck me when I saw this, when I read the report, is that economists tend to call this a Pareto superior situation, a Pareto superior outcome. That is to say, in all the metrics that you see, the heat not burned H&B products seem to be superior. So, I mean, if and you're talking of a sector which has very large health implications, public health implications, medical health implications, etc. So, obviously, I mean, given the huge and Dr. Banik will expound on this in his presentation, where there are so many costs involved, public costs, individual costs, out-of-pocket costs, etc. Any outcome which reduces those risks, to my mind, should be an obvious choice. And given the fact that one segment of this tobacco industry is actually allowed, is permitted, whereas other segments are not. So there are multiple implications. I mean, this has economic implications, this has behavioral implications, there are health implications, etc. Worldwide, this is a very regulated industry. The tobacco industry is a very regulated industry worldwide. I think I got the numbers from you, Nilanjan, Dr. Banik. So Euromonitor, which is a large consulting organization, it has projected the US markets, the tobacco markets in the US. In the cigarette market from 2022 to 2027 is projected to drop from $98 billion to 68 billion. All the other segments, this is a huge drop. So the projections in the revenues in that segment, whereas the smokeless tobacco and alternatives is projected to go from 24 to 32 billion. Yeah, in total, the tobacco market is projected to drop. This is in the US, 144 billion to 118 billion. Yeah, so the growth is that the project is in this smokeless tobacco. There is some other smoking products, other products, which is also scheduled to drop. But the biggest drop, $98 billion to $68 billion, is in the cigarette market. That's the revenue projections that they have. So obviously, I mean, given this, and there are so many implications, policy implications, regulatory implications, etc. I come from an industry which is also a very regulated industry, banking, finance. So all of that. So this is yet another industry amongst the others, which is very regulated and medical thing. So without further ado, I don't want to. So there are multiple implications, and particularly behavioral, communication, etc. So I mean, how do you communicate a change in policy, change in behavior? What are the budgets? What are the government programs that are needed? What are the regulatory, the coordinatory bodies of regulation that are needed? So multiple dimensions in looking at this, but the core proposition that I'm trying to understand, because I mean there are multiple, as we know, political implications as well as market competition, etc. So given that this product, HNB, heat not burn, is looks to be a far better alternative amongst the various alternatives, what is it that is creating this restriction, this barrier to bigger introduction? So one thing that I can immediately sense is that this is probably targeted towards the upper income segments of society, of households. So that's one thing, which is again, but I mean, and if we can get economies of scale going in the country, this has also other implications on manufacture, employment, etc. So unit costs begin to come down. So with the reach to middle income, lower income segments also begins to increase. So that's also a desirable policy outcome, and outcome, behavior or actual outcome that is a desirable outcome. So without further ado, let me hand over to Dr. Banik, Nilanjan. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you, Saugata, for this nice heads up in terms of what we are going to discuss. I am myself a teacher, so I like to walk and talk. Basically, I had the good fortune of visiting two countries last 2 months, South Korea and US. And what I've found over there, everyone is smoking. What I did not understand, what they are smoking, Of course, we are going to start this presentation with a statutory warning. Smoking is bad for health. But the idea is, if we have many alternatives, can we pick an alternative which is less hazardous to health? That is the starting point of this, writing this report and things like that. So, as you know, in fact, when I started working on this, even I didn't know, because to me, e-cigarettes is the one which I come across, people smoking and things like that. I did not knew about this product called heat not burn product, Just to give you a sense, what is the basic difference between e-cigarettes and HNB? E-cigarettes actually may use both nicotine as well as liquid oil, which can be used for vaping. And that is the, what I would say, from the regulation perspective, that is a bad part, because rather than having the smoking oil, you can have other type of stuff, for instance, marijuana and other things, which can become hard to regulate, And because of which, what happened was in 2019, in the state of Punjab, initially they put a all blanket ban on this type of e-cigarettes. And within e-cigarettes, what happened was this HNB product, which was newer to the market, it also was clubbed alongside the e-cigarettes. Now, one should understand that there is a difference between e-cigarettes and HNB. Unlike e-cigarettes, which actually use smoking oil, or for that matter, nicotine, or for that matter, any other illicit drugs, in case of HNB, they are just using nicotine as a product. So that is the first distinction. And therefore, there's other type of illicit activities, illegal activities that we tend to think that comes along with, let's say, e-cigarette, is not permissible under HNB. That is number one distinction. What is that? In the sense that you are only having nicotine as a product in the HNB. The second distinction is, unlike traditional cigarette, where you are combusting the nicotine at 900 degrees Celsius, here the combustion come at a much lesser temperature, which is around 350 degrees Celsius. Now, what is the implication of that? In terms of, and these are the studies which are showcasing, that in terms of the health impact, we have a doctor over here, in terms of particulate matter, compared to e-cigarettes, HNB has 75% less particulate matter. It has 60% less toxic element. Because whenever you are actually doing any study in terms of the health impact, basically what we do is, you look into the mainstream and side stream smoking. What is mainstream smoking? You are inhaling something which goes into your lungs. That is called the mainstream smoking. And then you also have the side stream smoking, which is basically on the tip of your cigarettes, you have some smoking elements happening, which is actually polluting the neighbors. So if, and the studies are done comparing the e-cigarettes, which, not only e-cigarettes, traditional cigarettes with HNB, and what was found in terms of the toxic element as well as this, the health impact, it is almost between 65 to 75% less toxic compared to the traditional cigarettes. But it's a kind of, what I would say, it has become kind of vogue, whether you are in South Korea or in US, everyone is actually using this HNB as a product. Unfortunately, it's not being allowed so far in India. Now, something what Dr. Bhattacharya mentioned, if I look into the market where this is allowed, for instance, Japan is one of the bigger market, you will find that the almost 28% of the population are into HNB. 25% of the population are into e-cigarettes. Traditional cigarettes, something what Dr. Bhattacharya mentioned, it is falling. It is 19%. So 28% is the HNB product which are presently there in the Japanese market. We also talked about the cost part. In fact, I was talking to a few of my friends who are into e-cigarettes. These days you can get e-cigarettes made out of, let's say, Thailand or Malaysia as low as 1600 rupees. So in that sense, costing is not going to be that much issue. But what you're gaining is in terms of the health impact, it has got much lesser toxic element compared to your e-cigarettes as well as traditional cigarettes. Now, why this is important? Because, again, something we kind of discussed. You know that in India, and these are the macro figures which you can check from the World Bank, 60% of our health expenditure is out of pocket expense, meaning that we are not under any insurance coverage, and therefore 60% of any health expenditure comes from our own pocket. To top that, if I look into again, the macro statistics, which is kind of suggesting that 80% of the diseases are in the form of non-communicable diseases. For instance, cancer, for instance, cardiovascular diseases. Interestingly, what the studies are also showcasing, that if I'm looking into the cancer as a whole, which is one of the largest killer, 50% of the cancer is happening because of smoking cigarettes, taking gutka, or other types of tobacco products. Therefore, something we started our discussion, can we therefore achieve or arrive at a scenario which is, we are not saying that we are going to restrict smoking together, because smoking as a category, it's one of the largest, what I'd say, they generate lots of tax as a revenue, So the government cannot restrict in any country smoking. Therefore, can we think of some alternative which has got a better health impact or less hazardous health impact compared to smoking traditional cigarettes? Unfortunately, what I was trying to say is this end is basically we are talking about electronic nicotine devices, which is HNB and that kind of thing. Something I said that if e-cigarettes is something can be used for other activities which are much more hazardous to health. You can also see that HNB products in that way is basically going to reduce this so-called toxic element, something I discussed. And if I go into, there are other also beneficial impact. One of the thing is, so this ban came in the year 2019, and this happened basically because of some illicit, illegal activities were happening among the youth in rural Punjab. Government came hard, federal government imposed a blanket ban. The white paper which was released by Indian Council of Medical Research in 2019, they said that this was based on e-cigarettes. It was not based on HNB. And what we are arguing, given this background information, that it is causing a less health hazard compared to e-cigarettes, there can be a condition of regulating it like traditional cigarette. So that is something what we are trying to argue through this report. In fact, there is, this is what I have already said, that potential harmful toxicant, it's reduced by almost 62% and particulate matter by at least 75%. These are studies which are undertaken but in addition to that, you also have this other impact in terms of income distribution. For instance, I just now mentioned that because you are paying from your pocket, if you are becoming, let's say, developing any cardiovascular diseases or cancer, basically it can have an impact on intergenerational income distribution, because most of the time you spend money from your pocket, and therefore if somehow we can push the population, because again there is a study which kind of showcased that the elasticity, price elasticity of cigarette product is 0.5, which is basically saying irrespective of what is the price, if you are addicted, you are going to smoke cigarette. Now, the idea is you are dealing with a product which is very difficult not to give away, because the income and the price elasticity are always, it's inelastic in the sense that no matter what is the price, you are going to still smoke cigarette, you are maybe still going to drink wine and stuff like that. Therefore, can we propose something where, given this price elasticity, you have a much lesser hazardous health impact, which in a way will allow people to have a more better lifestyle and therefore not pay that much money from their pocket as and when they get or fall sick. So that is the idea when I say that. In fact, if you know, again from the World Bank data, it shows, if I look into the US, per capita, the government is spending close to $9,000 per capita per annum. For UK, they are spending close to $4,500 per capita per annum on health. For India, that number is only $75 per capita per annum. So the government can do to a certain extent in terms of providing better healthcare infrastructure. But at this point of time, it is going to take at least 75 years before we can actually catch up with the per capita income that the US has, no matter how fast we are growing. And therefore, to expect the government to spend money in per capita terms, what is being spent elsewhere, is something we cannot do. So therefore, can we promote a product which is less hazardous than traditional cigarette? That was a Pareto superior kind of thing that Dr. Bhattacharya was mentioning, that given this stage, can we introduce a product? Because the choice-wise, given the inelastic nature of the product, it is very difficult for you to get de-addict, although there are instances people are giving up cigarettes. But if I took a look at the population as a whole, the number or the percentage is very small. And therefore, in that way, what Dr. Bhattacharya was mentioning, it's a kind of Pareto superior position in the sense that we are promoting a product with a much less health hazard compared to traditional cigarette, and in particular e-cigarettes. Something, if you go to any colleges, any areas, even in Delhi, you will find everyone is actually smoking e-cigarettes, no matter how much is the ban. So, in fact, another interesting data which I mentioned in my report, the market size of ITC in terms of market share is $500 million US. In spite of that, around 33% of the cigarettes sold in India, and this is more particularly true in the states neighboring Bangladesh, Myanmar, all this area. Almost 33% of the cigarette in those states, neighboring states where we have a land border with Nepal or Bangladesh or Myanmar, are coming illegally. So the other point that I want to flag at this point of time is government is, and by the way, cigarette falls, all these tobacco products fall under the highest GST slab, which is 28%. So there is also an economic angle in the sense that the government is also getting lots of money out of it. And the government, under no condition, is going to close all this thing. All we are arguing is, here there is a product, HNB, which compared to all other this product that you see, which are contributing to this non-communicable diseases, in particularly cancer. 50% of the cancer is happening because of chewing tobacco, smoking cigarettes, blah, 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 stuff like this. Can we therefore propose an alternative with much less health hazard, which hopefully will contribute less in terms of the health expenditure that anyone need to undertake? In a country like India, where not only 60% of our out-of-pocket expense goes towards preventing all these diseases that we are talking about. The other thing which I wanted to mention, that there's in economics, there is something called Laffer curve, which is basically saying that you can increase the tax, but beyond a point, if you increase, there will be a tendency of people not paying tax. So something I gave the numbers for the states in India, which are bordering our neighboring countries, 33% of the cigarettes are actually smuggled in. The reason is the tax rate is quite high. So what we are proposing is, if you were to bring this newer product, HNB, in the realm of all these other products, you need not have to actually increase the tax rate. You can actually get the excess revenue, because here is a product which is kind of acceptable. It is kind of in vogue among the younger generation, acceptable among the younger generation, and therefore it is not only going to help the government with the tax collection, but also going to reduce the health outcome in a beneficial way. So that is something that we are saying. And then, this is very interesting. H&B is a big market. Now, in India, if I look into the export figure, give and take, it is around $1,000 million, which India export to the rest of the world. Point to note here is, this export numbers, it has not grown. It is kind of stagnated. Why? Because if I look into the various tobacco product, this fall under 2401, 2402, 2404 categories. Most of the raw tobacco, in terms of the foreign exchange earning, in terms of value addition, it actually fall in the bottom of the pyramid. So although India, alongside Brazil and China, is one of the largest producer of tobacco product, but because we are not going up in the value addition in terms of the H&B type products, our export revenue, or the amount of money we are generating from the export of the tobacco product, is more or less constant. So it also have an implication from the perspective of foreign direct investment. As you know that starting 2016, if I look into the FDI number, that number as a percentage of GDP has fallen from 3.5% of GDP. Right now, as we are speaking, it's 1.7% of the GDP. And there are plenty of articles which has been written as to why this is the case. One of the main reasons is, of course, we have imposed lots of ban on the Chinese FDI movement. What we are arguing is, if we were to again allow this kind of newer product, not only it's going to create employment generation, it is going to create an extra export revenue. It can also create an additional opportunity to earn income. As you know that we have around 5 to 6 million workers who work in the bidi factories. You know, these are the unorganized sector. In terms of the wage rate these bidi workers are earning, it's quite low. In fact, it is lower than India's per capita income. And you have this organized sector like ITC and other VSTs, the other industry, you know, which are in the business of manufacturing cigarettes. You employ only 40 million, the total 40 million of the employment. So what we are proposing is, if you were to allow this, not only is going to increase your export revenue because we are encouraging a high value added product in the Indian country, it is going to attract FDI flow. It is also going to create an opportunity so that the livelihood of the farmers, again, as we speak, 80% of our India's farmers are small and marginal farmers with a per capita income less than India's per capita income, most of them. Therefore, can we look into other alternatives? Because again, if you look into bidi as a manufacturing, they are only contributing 0.6% of the manufacturing value addition. So there is a need to go from the lower value added tobacco product to a higher value added tobacco product, which is not only A, going to increase our export revenue, B, going to incentivize FDI inflow, C, and more importantly, going to increase the livelihood of the farmers. That is something we are proposing. And of course, the overarching theme is, here there is a product which is less hazardous than the traditional cigarettes. So all of these other things we'll be able to achieve, provided we are going to regulate this. At this point of time, what is happening is, we are not only putting a clamp, blanket, without understanding the rationale, you know, but these are the rationales for which we think it can be introduced, of course, with a regulation, like the cigarettes that we see in the market. So, yes, oh sorry, good that you point out. In fact, Italy and UAE, these are the two countries which are exporting a huge amount of H&B products to countries like US, UK, and Japan, where it is allowed. This spike happened one year because they kind of signed one agreement with the Japanese government. And in fact, there is another country, Poland, So all these countries are taking advantage of the fact, for instance, if you go to the UK, as I said, they are allowing the H&B product. If you go to the US, they are allowing the H&B product. And government over there, being a developed countries, understand the beneficial impact in the sense that given a scenario A or B, which one is less hazardous? In this case, H&B is less hazardous, so they have opened the market for this kind of product.
UAE being, I'm sure UAE does not produce.
No, it's more like a transshipment. Yes. UAE is the transshipment for many things, including crude oil, even for the Indian importers. If you talk to, you'll find that they are actually dealing with the UAE dinar. So, therefore, given all this objective, I think it is very likely we can argue it is a better product in terms of being less hazardous. It is a better product in terms of value addition that is creating in terms of the output which is being manufactured. It is a better product in terms of employment generation. It is a better product in terms of creating more employment, value-added employment opportunity, better product in terms of FDI inflow, better product in terms of increase in export revenue in that particular category when we are talking about tobacco as a category. So I will stop here because there is no way you can actually stop the younger generation from vaping. All we are saying that is there a better product which kind of prevent this vaping, illicit drugs, marijuana type of things. Can we introduce this better product with a much lesser health hazard? So I'll stop here. We'll be happy to, we can have the discussion, any question, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for that. Before we move on to the panel discussion, I'd like to welcome Urvashi Prasad ma'am. We are very grateful to have you amongst us today. Kindly accept a token of our appreciation. Thank you. We can perhaps begin with the panel discussion.
So, is there any preference for speakers to, or should we just follow whichever? I mean,
Sasmit ji.
So
I'm the most uninitiated.
okay. So, Dr. Prasad, over to you.
Thank you, and this is a very fascinating study and report as I was going through it. So just to say that, my perspective is not really economic. That's not my forte. I'm a public health professional. I'm trained in public health. So, and of course now working in the policy space, including at NITI Aayog for the last 8 years. So I can wear a bit of a policy hat as well, in addition to my public health training. So I think one thing is that, what constitutes evidence is very important to understand, because those of us who work in public health, we've been trained to read scientific papers, ever since we were doing our graduation. And who has funded those studies? How have those studies happened? All of these are very important questions. We do know that this is, in general, a very powerful industry, as is, say, big pharma, for instance. And often, you go to the end of the study and you have this small little 2 lines there which says funded by so-and-so, right? Now, that doesn't mean that all the results are manipulated, but they can certainly be presented in a way which can make a more favorable case for the particular entity, funding entity in question. So firstly, I'm personally also not very convinced of the evidence when we talk of the scientific evidence. And I think many agencies are not, because I've had many people approach me at NITI Aayog, and so I've also done a lot of research in terms of, speaking to people in WHO or speaking to Cancer Research UK, even countries that do allow these products. But there's a lot of mixed views. And so I think just to make it clear that there's no unequivocal view on the scientific evidence, it is still very contested. So I think that's one important point. The other is, like even the study points out that evidence is at a point in time. This is what we know as of now. This is what we know. And these products are still, even in other markets, in the overall scheme of things, relatively new. So the evidence that we have is fairly short term. What might emerge 2 years later, 3 years later, we cannot say. And then if we get evidence to the contrary, or evidence to say that, well, these do no less harm or these do harm in different ways, then I can imagine that, those policymakers who took that call to say that, yes, let's bring it in, could feel the heat, could feel that why did we do this, because now we have some new evidence emerging. So I can just put myself in their shoes. Obviously, I was not the one who was sitting there and deciding whether to ban it or not to ban it. But I'm just putting myself in their shoes to say that this could be something that would be in their minds, that this is only what we know in the short term about the benefit or harm of these products. So I think that is my point related to the public health side of things and the evidence. The other point quickly I'll just make is on the regulation aspect, which was brought up that, anyway people are doing it. But I think anyway people are doing a lot of things that they shouldn't be doing. So that isn't enough of a reason to be promoting something. But the problem is that, yes, regulation is a big challenge for us, and regulation is a very complex space. It's not just the center, it's the states. And we are finding it hard enough to, as the study notes, regulate even what we are supposed to in the existing landscape. Now here you're going to bring out an entirely new category of products. We'll have to gear up our entire regulatory capacity for that. People will have to be trained. People will have to know, how they're dealing with this. So the laws, the regulations, the rules will have to now be built accordingly. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. It's not very simple to just say that, okay, today we allow these. There'll have to be a lot of work that'll have to happen in the background if we do that. So I think those are just a few of the limited points I wanted to make. Thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone. Basically, that's a very good discussion regarding the HNBs or HTPs. So, being a healthcare professional, generally I actually did the DM from the Patel Chest, and that is a basically institute where not only the pulmonary medicines patients come, but also for there is a separate basically OPDs for the smoking cessation. So, and this is a very one of the very few institutes where the smoking cessation occurs. So, to the very surprise, with the best of our efforts, only around 15% of the patients in a one study, they were able to quit smoking. So it is very easy to say the person who is smoking since decades that go and quit smoking. But basically quitting smoking is, it's associated with not only a physical, but majorly a psychological dependency. And that is basically an addiction and a habit forming, and it's very, very challenging to quit smoking. So it is always easy to give them the drugs or give them some form of the medicines to quit smoking. But we have seen, and we had a very large number of data, around 748 patients, which was published in International Journal, and it concluded that around only 14% patients, with the best of our efforts, they were able to quit. So the question is that, with the HNBs promoting, are we doing the good for the society? But yeah, really for those who are not able to quit, it is really good. So I will say, if we don't have any option, like if the patients who are not able to quit smoking or the public who are not able to quit smoking, so what we are left with is to go with the to the products which is less hazardous. So as the discussion is, so now what we are left with the ants like the HNBs or the e-cigarette or the vapor. So as compared to the e-cigarette or the vapor products, the HNBs, they are having a less number of nicotine emission, and the tar and the carbon monoxide and the sulfur dioxide. And carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, they are going to be a biggest hazard as far as the cancer or the cardiovascular disease or the respiratory disease is concerned. So even the studies which we have done regarding which particulate matter or the which product is more hazardous, whether this is a carbon monoxide or the particulate matter. So regarding the cancer or the respiratory disease, these are the carbon monoxide, sulfur and the particulate matter. And in the studies we have, actually I saw just yesterday one study was there, and that was published in some international journal. It was showing that as compared to these conventional smoking or conventional cigarette, these HNBs, they are having around 20 to 25% reduction in the nicotine emission and around 40% reduction in the particulate matter. And both of these are very hazardous for the cancer. So definitely one thing is certain, that the HNBs, they are going to be less hazardous as compared to the conventional smokers. So if we are not any option other than to go with the smoking, so there is no harm to choose the HNB over the conventional smoking. So as Mr. Bhattacharya sir has told that now it is basically it should be regularized definitely, because any unregularized thing is going to be malused. And definitely like e-cigarettes, which is still not banned in the developed countries but in the India. Why? Because it was malused, because the marijuana was used, because that was basically an open system. But this HNBs, they are a closed system, so there is a very minimal chances to be manipulated with its content or its to its being manhandled. So I'll say that I will not going to say that it should be used or should be banned or not, but definitely it's a very good alternative we have at present in our hand, and we can go ahead with it positively, with in a positive manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I speak on this topic, because I'll be speaking as a generalist, and I have the background of economics, and presently I'm working in railways. So all the views are personal, based on the information available in public domain. So what I could gather in the presentation, that we are arguing that regulatory regime towards use of HNB would be a better or a superior option than prohibiting it totally, because it holds more significance when you cannot change the consumer behavior overnight. So as we have seen historically, that regulation, ban on products, it results in emergence of underground market. It helps criminal elements in seeking profit in illicit trade and commerce. Otherwise, it has one more economic implication, that is loss of revenue exchequer. And moreover, one more aspect is that it has public health risk in terms of spurious drugs available, where like I was just going through one of the NCRB, National Crime Record Bureau data, which says that death due to spurious drugs, number of deaths due to spurious drugs are more than the deaths caused due to these alcohol or drugs, otherwise drugs. So and there are constantly there are seizures of e-cigarettes happening all along after this prohibition started. So and we have seen in case of governments where alcohol has been banned, so their public is going through double whammy. Why I'm saying that? Because they are buying the product at double the price which they could have got if it was not banned. And otherwise, when they are caught, then they are at the wrong side of the law, and they are not getting the public goods because government is not getting the revenue. There is a loss of revenue to the exchequer. So there is double whammy for the public. So if we look at historically, then of course regulation is better as a better option than banning anything, and especially these drugs which are more of a behavioral thing, and you cannot compel, or because as just ma'am said that it's very difficult to prohibit or you regulate. This is a very complex environment. So and apart from this, as already economic perspective has been spoken by the by Dr. Banik. So one of the things which I got that there is a huge market in developed country. It's expected to grow at the rate of 18.5% of CAGR, and this is going to be the market is going to reach. It is going to be worth around $37 billion by 2027. So it's when we are in India, in the tobacco market, we are the second largest exporter, and we are down in the value wise. Our export is very in the low value chain, global supply chain. It's only 0.7%. So we can move up in the value chain, and we can tap that market. So that is one of the economic perspective. No doubt there is a huge public health cost is there, but I think the best policy is that results into best overall bundle of outcomes. So we have to see all the outcomes added, like in short term, evidence suggests that H&Bs are less hazardous than traditional cigarettes and e-cigarettes. We have a huge market which can be tapped, and of course we can move up the value chain in the global supply chain, and it will help the livelihoods of the dependent people on the tobacco farming. Like 36 million people are dependent, out of which 6 million is farmer, 20 million are laborers, and the remaining they are into manufacturing and exporting business. So I think need of the hour is to give it a serious thought. It can be given a serious thought whether to regulate it instead of going for complete ban. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have heard the fellow panelists and some of the comments that have come up, like superior alternative, regulations are better than banning, and so long and so forth. But as a public health professional, I have been working for last 25 years in public health domain, initially with UN, then with Minister of Health almost for a decade, and then with Tata Trust as senior advisor, and now heading a healthcare agency. So when initially this subject and topic, I was being told that I have to give the opening remarks, I have to talk on this project. So I started getting deeper into the research. I might have, before I have heard Professor Banik today talking about H&B, but prior to that, I also read almost 20 research papers wherein we came to know, like the major outcome of all the global research papers has been that H&B devices are less harmful when it comes to the, traditional, cigarettes. Like for example, I came to know through Professor Banik's presentation, like when we talk about H&B, almost 70% less toxic They are as compared to e-cigarettes or vaporizers. And I have seen a lot of like, in 20s and 30s in my staff, the young crowd, they are having the vaporizers, vape pens and those kind of things. And the deeper we get into it, what it is, I think then they are much more harmful than the HNB. HNB is more or less like, reduced combustion product, but still delivers something same of the smoking. So I think with not burning, combustion is the main, issue. So similar to giving you some kind of, that buzz that smoking gives you. So I feel that having a proper regulation, like what I would suggest as a public health professional would be HNB, devices depends upon the, comprehensive regulations, how we can have the comprehensive regulation combined with definitely research to ensure that how we can align it with the public health larger objectives. One is that. Second is that HNB devices has actually across world reshaped the landscape of influencing the regulations, influencing the economic landscape. So we have to look at a public health professional that it should not further harm, but what is it that it gives better, those not like someone who is not smoking, but someone who is smoking and giving him alternatives of, having less toxicity, maybe switching to non-smoker over a period of time. So as such, I would be talking more on these kind of things. I think we need also to have a clear definition of HNB, which has not been there. Like with it, as Professor Banik said, it is like an umbrella ban that has been given. While as that needs to be very categorically, there needs to be a distinct category for HNB than we are having like for e-cigarettes and vaporizers and other things like that. These are few of the points that I would like to put at this point. Maybe later on I can add on.
Would the Honorable Chair want to say something before I take the floor? No, thank you so much, and especially to IMPRI for organizing this and for inviting me here, and to the panel of distinguished colleagues on this dais who are far more distinguished and learned than me in this field, especially of healthcare. I would not want to repeat or probably infer and interpret relating to what has already been discussed. In 2019, the bill banning e-cigarettes came to the floor of the parliament. I was present in the parliament, we debated, and we banned it. The question is, for the first time, few months ago, I came across this term, heat not burn devices. We banned the bill, we passed the bill and banned it. But very honestly, if you were to really go back, anyone, I'm sure you would have done your due diligence and gone through the debate in the parliament, both in the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha. Have you done that? Has anyone gone through the debate that was done on the parliament floor in 2019 and the justifications provided by the parliamentarians in parliament relating to e-cigarettes? I think that's a due diligence you need to do. Because you're talking about the banning of the heat not burn devices, but you've not done your due diligence to actually go and see what transpired when the banning of this was done. So you're talking about a cause of action, but we are not going into the action in itself. So I believe probably 2 or 3 of the young minds here should spend some time, go into the online database that is there of the parliament, go into the verbatim debates that was there on that specific bill on that specific day, and then cull out the justifications or the opposition, if any, relating to e-cigarettes. That's one. Because we're talking about banning, but we have not gone into what was really debated that led to the banning on the floor of the parliament. That's point number one. The second issue, I'm pretty sure if you were to go through the discussion on the floor of the parliament, you 99% chances, I would say, you would not find that heat not burn devices have been discussed at all. Because very honestly, if we were to look at the bill, such a matter was probably camouflaged or probably not even taken notice of, because the overarching discussion was e-cigarettes. So the point I'm trying to make very briefly in my intervention is not so much about the HNB devices, but primarily relating to the lack of information that are we also banning HNB was probably not even dawned upon the parliamentarians on that specific day. That apart from e-cigarettes, we have also banned an HNB device. So therefore, I would suggest that going forward, we can have interactions. Professor Banik has done a tremendous job in terms of coming up with a presentation. But the concern when we talk about what we're doing here is policy advocacy. But policy advocacy goes a certain length and space. Thereafter comes policy formulation and legislation. Now, if you feel that this policy advocacy would lead to a form of policy formulation through the executive, that would lead to the executive again place it before the legislature to amend it, then the process has to be looked at from 2 or 3 perspectives. And with that, I will close. The first perspective, how do you bring this information in a form, shape, or dimension that makes sense to the executive, which does the policy formulation? So the distance that you walk from policy advocacy to policy formulation is very critical. Then for the executive to agree to it. And then the second piece, between the executive to the legislature, from a policy framework to becoming a legislation. And the third piece is for the legislature then to probably feel and own up this need or a lack of it or whatever, and then probably turn it into a act. So these are the 3 pieces. Unless you decipher, you formulate, you create, and you identify as your role model or your focus area or the way you want to take it forward, then we can do all of policy advocacy for the next 2 decades, nothing will change. And there are various platforms, there are various forums. I would say as a parliamentarian that the basic, you as healthcare professionals here, as healthcare people who have a focus on it, you are the domain specialist. I am a generalist. Anything and everything under the sun on this planet comes on my table. Whether it's healthcare, it's transportation, finance, irrigation, agriculture, or new and renewable energy. The entire universe and everything around it, all the topics come on my table. So I have barely little time to actually go through it in the same depth and understanding as probably you would. Because you work within a certain sector, or at least a few sectors connected around it. So therefore, you have to also give the benefit of the doubt to the parliamentarians and the policy makers of probably the bureaucrats and the members of parliament, because a bureaucrat who is in a ministry of health and family welfare is there for 3 years. Then he goes to textile. Somebody in textile comes to health. Somebody from sports goes to textile. Somebody from agriculture comes to health. And that keeps on changing every 3 years. So how do you appreciate and expect them to be able to appreciate and understand what Professor Banik is saying? That's one. Second, I agree with the idea that, right now we discussed about it, that the empirical analysis, the evidence behind it, and whether there is some form, may not be a major element on it, which probably, Urvashi ji actually mentioned, is probably the right platform to discuss all of this, or probably to bring it to the notice with the Parliamentary Standing Committee, to probably catch the attention of the Parliamentary Standing Committee. Because unless you inform, you sensitize, you make people aware, and of course there'll be questions, just like Urvashi ji said, that you are referring to certain studies and details. Yes, may be true, may not be. And then you'll be faced with the real concerns and the questions that would really follow. Why do you say so? How do you say so? Where does it come from? How are you so sure? So I think the right questions at the right places is very crucial. I'll stop here, but I really enjoyed this conversation and this discussion. Probably you can continue the conversation going forward. But I would say for parliamentarians, policy framers, policy executors, and legislators, information is the key. Most of the times we are inundated with so much of information, it makes very little sense for us to actually delve deeper. We don't have that space and time. So if you provide it in a right measure, with the right background, the right context, probably it'll start making sense. Thank you.
Patra, in the sense that how we now convince, so we have placed certain sets of argument based on certain sets of literature so as to make it convincing. Now, I think what he rightly mentioned, that how do we go to the next stage in terms of talking with the executives who are in charge of this, and try to maybe through a much more lucid kind of presentation or argument, convince them. Thank you, sir.
Agree that, data, I think you need far more data, although, overall it seems to, first of all, this was an incredible set of comments, learning experience for me. All of us came into this thing that rather than a ban, more effective regulation is needed. But regulation, I don't know what the structure of regulation you have in mind, and unless you have evidence and data, you will not be able to design that regulation. So what exactly are the key risks that need to be targeted, etc. So in banking, you have something called sandboxes. So controlled experiments, pilots in other areas, etc. I'm wondering, public health professionals in this panel, would you be able to recommend something? I can't imagine. What kind of a pilot, a controlled experiment might be suggested that can offer some potential evidence in a controlled environment, not allow this. So would anybody want to take a shot on any of this? Given your extensive public health experiences, etc.
Yeah, I think, as Dr. Pawan was also saying, we could certainly, of course, we can't encourage non-smokers to use these products also. But I think people who are, say, really struggling to give up, smoking through the conventional routes, we could, have some sort of experiment using such people to say that, if we put some of them, on a product like this, does it actually help them, and does it actually do less harm, and be able to make that case perhaps that way, because it's hard to have a control group otherwise in this particular kind of a study. But I think there could be ways in which it could be done, and I think that's what I said, when we will get unbiased evidence is when I think even as a policy maker, we'll be truly convinced that, okay, this was completely it was not funded by a company, but it was a research we did independently.
I think the data regarding the comparative study between the e-cigarettes or H&B is lacking in India, because it was banned since 2019 and H&B came late. So I think the randomized controlled trials in the premier institutes like AIMS or Patel Chest under the control condition to compare the efficacy and health hazards and its adverse effects, if any, between the e-cigarettes or conventional cigarettes or H&B is to be conducted in India, especially in the controlled conditions. Then we'll be in the more then we will be more wiser to say anything because we will have real data from the India.
I think a couple of points that come to my mind, sir. I think Dr. Patra has already raised some of the very. I think he has actually created a roadmap for us now, how we can build the evidence together. Maybe from this study, how we can put it across to the policymakers. Today we are discussing as an advocacy kind of a thing, how we can reach out to the right. We have the Urvashi ji here. She's from NITI Aayog. Definitely Ministry of Health is also there. So how we can reach out to the right kind of, corridors of policy making. That includes the NITI Aayog, Ministry of Health, ICMR, how we can raise these concerns that HNB can be a super alternative than to e-cigarettes or other kind of vaporizers or vapors or pens, or especially for those, being a public health professional, I will always prefer people not to smoke. But if we have to look out for an alternative, for those who cannot leave the smoking, for those who are so much habitual, and giving them a, basket of choice. I think as a professional, public health professional, we always believe in giving people basket of choice. Whether I am talking about the reproductive health or whether I am talking about those who are chain smokers and how to break them. So I think if we can give these kind of alternatives and basket of choice to the people and have the proper regulations, not only this thing, but I would also suggest like having the regulations, having the kind of, key strategies within the policymakers, and how we can, as Professor Patra said, that you need to reach out to this parliamentary standing committee. You need to reach out to the right kind of, corridors, wherein we can say that the blanket ban was given like not going deeper into like what all these have the different kind of, harm to the human beings, what level of harms they have. We don't have the same kind of harm, like for example, traditional smoking or hookah. Hookah to in villages, like ladies used to have like most of, I think 75% of the ladies, when they had to go and have, loo, to go to loo, they would take hookah. While as hookah is so much concentrated and combustion is so much there, it is much more harsh than even cigarette. And then as compared to cigarette, like when it is a heated product, when we say heat not burn product, so it has much less, even the aerosols that are formed is almost at 350 degrees centigrade. So which is like very less, but at least giving that kind of buzz, especially as a public health professional. I'm not saying that we have to go for it, but I'm saying give the options, give the basket of choice. That's it from me, sir.
Excellent. So, Dr. Patra, any after hearing the comments on, so anything? So I open the floor.
So there are a few questions. So would you like to take them one at a time or a few together? Okay. So the first one is that could you tell us a bit more about the total amount of revenue that's foregone from HNBS in terms of, say, taxes, etc.? Could you give us a number?
We have not calculated that because, first of all, this product is not there in the market. So for doing that kind of study, you need to have what we call counterfactual experiment. Look into a country with similar purchasing power and then try to figure out that if this were to be introduced, like in the case of Japan, how much revenue can be generated. And because it's not there in the market, you cannot comment at this point of time.
We have two more questions. Another is that could you tell us more about the status of HNBS in South Asia and Southeast Asian countries, China, over the years that has taken place?
I'm not clear about the Southeast Asian countries, but for Japan, UK, US, these are the big markets. And as we have already discussed, compared to traditional cigarettes and e-cigarettes, the CAGR, compound annualized growth rate for HNB is much more faster. I can tell you that 18%, it's around 18%. That's what one of the studies mentioning. And if you look into the composition in developed countries, almost 28% is from HNBs, followed by e-cigarettes, which is around 25%, and followed by traditional cigarettes, which is around 19%.
And so we also see that in developed countries, this market is booming quite a bit. So could you tell us a bit more about the challenges faced by HNPS in developed countries?
There is no challenge, because whenever you are introduced or get exposed to a newer product, you always try to experiment that. That's a human psychology, right? That is also the marginal school of thought, that if you are introduced to something new, you always try it out and then figure it out whether you want to. But going by the CAGR thing that I just now mentioned, it seems that the people are accepting it. So that is the thing.
Thank you so much for that, sir. If there are any more questions from the audience.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, I would like to actually, am I audible? I think I would like to extend a gratitude since Dr. Arjun, would you like to say a big thank you to everyone? So on behalf of NRI, I would like to thank everyone, Mr. Saugata Bhattacharya ji for his expertly guiding today's session, and all our panelists, to start with Dr. Sasmit Patra ji, Ms. Urvashi Prasad ji, Dr. Pawan Gupta ji, Mr. Sanjeet Kumar ji, and also myself, I am there. And then I would like to request everyone to join us for tea, and I look forward that we will have discussion during tea also. And also, I also look forward to sort of having a dialogue and continue this engagement, so that, because maybe we will meet often regarding this, because we may have to discuss and have it at next level of discussion around it, build more evidence around it, as Professor Urvashi ji has said. So maybe we can have some cohort studies and we'll be meeting around it. And now I don't want to come in between your tea, so please join us for the tea. And thank you, Dr. Arjun, for inviting me, and Dr. Banik for inviting me. And thanks everyone